What's going on, CDL fans? Today, as you can see on screen, we're going through our pick'ems for Major 4. Now, we're going to go through all 3 weeks, and if things end up changing with rosters, I will update my week 2 or week 3, when that time comes. But for now, we're going to go through all the pick'ems. They also added, you can't see, but in this top right corner behind my webcam, they added a challenges thing. So now there's different challenges you can do to actually unlock rewards that you can use in game, which is pretty cool. Although I don't really play too much COD these days, so not super useful for me right now. But that is pretty cool, and let's just hop right into our pick'ems. I also believe that some of these matches, I'm not sure how many, are actually being played in person in Minnesota at their facility, so that's pretty cool. So some of these matches should actually be on LAN, which would just make for more, a more fun viewing experience. But let's just do our pick'ems right away. Starting off, we have the new Vegas team bringing in Standy for TwoReal. Personally, I kind of think TwoReal actually was playing pretty good for this team. I think Tej might have been a better move instead for Standy, but Tej has also been really good in Search and Destroy, so I think this new team adding Standy will have a bit of a honeymoon phase, and I do think they can take down Boston 3-2. Also, if you see me looking down, it's because I have all of my pick'ems pre-written down on here, just so I don't have to take too long going through each pick'em and thinking about it. But I do think this Vegas team will have a bit of a honeymoon phase, as I said, and I think they could take down a pretty strong Boston team, but still closer to the middle of the pack. Then we have LA Thieves versus London. I'm thinking London's the worst team in the league, obviously. I'm gonna go 3-1. I think they can grab probably a Search and Destroy off of LA Thieves, who seem to be struggling in Search and Destroy as they seem to always do. But I'm gonna go Thieves 3-1, pretty comfortable. And then Atlanta FaZe versus Subliners, a game that I think could go either way, although the Subliners have been struggling. So for that reason, I'm gonna go 3-2 Atlanta FaZe. I do think they come up well against each other. I just think FaZe have stronger ARs, whereas I think the SMG duos are pretty evenly matched. I'd say overall the FaZe SMGs are better, but Kismet has been playing really, really well, and obviously Hydra is one of the best players in the game. So I do think these teams are pretty well balanced, but Cellium and Slasher are definitely better than Priest and Skies in my opinion. Then we move on into Saturday, April 1st, where we have the Florida Mutineers versus the Minnesota Rokkr. Now I do think this new Minnesota team, which moved attached to the bench and brought in Fame, should have a little bit of a honeymoon phase as well. I think we're going to see that with some of these teams that made changes, so I'm going to go 3-1 here. I think this Florida team is obviously a weaker team in the league. I think Minnesota will have a bit of success because they're also going to be playing in Minnesota, as far as I know. So I think this team could pick up a dub. Then we have the current, reigning major champions, Toronto Ultra versus the Boston Breach. Now, I do really like Boston. I think they had a really good showing, making top 4 at the last event. And I think they're a team that is solid and definitely, it's a really good team, but I don't know. Going up against Toronto, I'm going to go 3-1, making sure that's what I have written down. Yeah, 3-1. I do think Toronto is just overall a better team, and I think that they can take Boston pretty well. Then we have the Minnesota Rokkr, which, first of all, I don't know if we've ever seen a team play twice in one day. Minnesota's playing Florida at 2 and then playing LAG at 5. I don't know if we've ever seen this. I don't know if this is a mess up, but they have it on both websites. I mean, you can see here, they're on both websites. So I guess this is actually happening where they're playing both their matches on the same day, which is interesting for week 1. But I do think that Minnesota is going to go, I don't know, I don't want to say back-to-back, but I guess back-to-back on both games this day. I do think they give them an extra map against LAG, but I think this Minnesota Rokkr team has a great week 1 or great Saturdays because they're all being played on Saturday. I think they have a good week here, and they go 2-0. And for our last match on Saturday, we have the Seattle Surge versus the LA Thieves. Now, this is a series that I think can go either way. I think both of these teams can be really hot and play really well, and then also they can be really cold and just kind of get dominated. As an LA Thieves fan, I'm going to have a little bit of bias here, and I'm going to go 3-1 in favor of the LA Thieves over Seattle Surge, although I do think Seattle's a team that's going to make some waves for this major. Then we move into Sunday, where we have Seattle versus Toronto. Now, like I just said, I do think Seattle can make some waves, and I do think they take down Toronto here 3-2. Toronto is obviously or arguably the best team in the game as of right now, being as they just won the past major. Teams always are, you're going to lose games, right? It's very hard to go 5-0 in Call of Duty these days in the CDL. So I do think Seattle takes them down 3-2. I think this is going to be one of those. Fred has a monster series, and someone maybe like Hixie kind of has a hard series. CleanX maybe not having as many kills as we saw with the past major. So I'm going to go Seattle 3-2. Then we have Optic Texas versus London Royal Ravens. I just feel bad for London because it's hard to even give them a map in a lot of these series, let alone a series win. Although I would not be surprised if they pull out a win at some point during these qualifiers. I definitely think it's possible, but it's hard to pick London because of how poorly they perform, although they did look pretty good at the major against Optic, even though Optic did end up getting the victory. And last but not least, we have Atlanta FaZe versus Florida Mutineers, a series that I think, Florida could keep it close, could make it close. It might be some close maps, but I'm going to think FaZe handle this pretty easily, and they get the 3-0. Now we go on into week number 2 from April 7th through April 9th. Now this, I think, is another week that's going to be filled with some good matches. London versus Boston up first. Sorry to do it to London, but I'm going to go 3-0 Boston. I think Boston is just honestly a really good team. They're good at every game mode. I do think they can take London, although like I said with the last one, I think London can keep it somewhat close maybe in some of these maps. Overall, I'm thinking Boston stronger. Seattle versus Florida. I'm going to go Seattle 3-2. Florida's a team that's super sneaky, and they can come out and win any series at any point in time if their players are going off, especially someone like Havoc. I think that Seattle's just a stronger team overall and a safer pick. The last matchup we have for Friday of week 2 is Minnesota Rocket versus New York Subliners. I did say I thought Minnesota's gonna have a bit of a honeymoon period. I have them at 2-0 in the first week, but I do think Subliners take this one 3-2. I think Minnesota is going to be decent this stage, not nearly as bad as they were last stage where they ended up 0-6 with the 0-5 in qualifiers and then getting first rounded in losers bracket at the major. I think New York is going to have a bit of a rebound and they're going to take this. Then we move into Saturday where we have Vegas versus London. I'm going to go Vegas 3-2 here. I think London can keep it close with this Vegas team. They're another team who I think can be very hit or miss, but I do think Vegas has what it takes, especially if they're clicking well with Standy on the roster. I think they can definitely win a bunch of series. Now, LAT versus LAG is a big one. Obviously, it's the Battle of LA. Historically, LAG pretty much wins this almost every time. I don't know what the actual records are. I mean, I can kind of see here based on this stuff, but you can see here 3-1, 3-2, 3-2, 3-0, 3-0. This is obviously just showing the last 5 head-to-head between these teams. But considering LAG's team versus the LA Thieves team in this game, I'm still going to give it to Thieves. Obviously, historically, LAG has beaten LAT, but I'm going to give it to Thieves. Then we have New York versus Optic Texas. Now, like I said, against Minnesota, I think New York is going to have a bit of a rebound week here, and I think they take this 3-2. I think Optic is a solid team, obviously. They placed top 2 at the last major, but anything can really happen in any match, and I do think New York is a team that can definitely get this victory, so I'm going to go New York 3-2. One thing I've learned when doing pick'ems is teams, it's very hard for a team to go 5-0 or even 4-1 in qualifiers. Of course it happens, but literally any team can beat any other team at any moment in the CDL. It can happen in a match. You have one down map or one down series and you're just going to lose. So I think anything can happen, and I do think Toronto takes the FaZe 3-1. I think literally, like I said, anything can happen in the CDL in the way it's currently being played, and I think there's going to be some big upsets we're going to see that people don't predict, and that's why I'm trying to make my predictions a little bit variable, not just always picking the team that you would think is the better one. But I do think that Toronto takes down FaZe. We have LAG versus Vegas. Like I literally just said, anybody can win at any point. I'm going to go LAG getting this one 3-2. I think Vegas is a stronger team. Anything can happen in this league. It is totally crazy. There's the skill gap is really shortened in Call of Duty over the years, and I'm going to go LAG. Then we have Toronto versus Florida. I'm going to go 3-0 Toronto. Pretty bold here. Florida obviously could take this series, if something crazy happens. They also could get a map or two, but I'm going to go Toronto 3-0 just because you got to sprinkle some 3-0s in there. It's very easy to give out 3-1s here, 3-1s there, because it's like, you could take a map, but you got to throw in some 3-0s for the sake of the prediction points. So I'm going to give it 3-0 here. And then Optic Texas versus LA Thieves, a match that I'm sure a majority of the league is looking forward to. I mean, everyone loves to watch these two teams play. I'm going to go LAT 3-1. I think LAT usually performs pretty well against Optic. We can actually check here. Yeah, they've won 4 of the last 5 that they've played here. In 2023, they've won 1, or they're 1-1 against each other. A lot of people are going to pick Optic because I think they just tend to have more fans. Plus, they got second at the last major. But I think Kenny also really plays well against Optic, and he's had kind of a slow year. So I'm going to go 3-1 in favor of LAT. And last but not least, week 3, the 14th to the 16th. Kicking it off, I'm going to go Toronto 3-1 over Vegas. Honestly, I kind of want to switch this up and maybe give Vegas the win. I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to go 3-2 Vegas. I'm going to go against what I originally wrote down on my piece of paper here when I was looking at these series and kind of analyzing them a bit. Let's see what people are really predicting. Most people are predicting Ultra. Ultra seem to historically do really well against Vegas. I'm going to change it up. We're going to go 3-2 in terms in Vegas. This is a double pointer, so getting this right would be huge for the pick'em leaderboard, but I think this could go either way. Texas versus LAG. I'm going to go 3-2 Texas. I do think they should be able to handle LAG. Minnesota versus FaZe. I'm going to go 3-1. I think FaZe obviously is going to be a top 2, top 3 team for the entire year, as they always are, and I think they can handle a Minnesota team that seems to be going through a lot right now. New York versus London. I'm going to go 3-1. I think London's the only team I'm not giving a win in this stage at all, or in this major qualifiers at all. They're probably going to get one. Like I said, anything happens in this league, and it's very hard to go 5-0. It's also pretty hard to go 0-5. So I do think London could get a series, but I'm just going to continue to give them losses. Florida versus Vegas. I'm going to go 3-2 Florida. Like I said, I think most teams are going to get a win at some point during this, other than London. So Florida 3-2 over Vegas. I think this is probably a series they could definitely win, and I could see them taking. Optic versus Breach, a rematch of the major. I'm going to go Optic 3-2 here. I think this is bold. I think if it goes to Search and Destroy, Boston seems to play pretty good in Search, especially Beans, and Nero also is really good at Search and Destroy. But I'm going to give it Optic. I think Optic has a little bit of, that star power that can really push them over the edge in some of these games. Then Seattle versus FaZe, another one for the ages, a one that, is always fun to watch, although in the last 5, FaZe really had their number, although Seattle historically seems to do pretty good against FaZe, or at least pushes them to deep series. I mean, you can see 3-2, 3-2. I'm going to go 3-2 into favor of Seattle. I do think Seattle can take this. I don't think FaZe are unbeatable. I don't think they're perfect, and I think they've showed that throughout the last year and even the last 2 years. So I'm going to go Surge. And then for our final 3 matchups, we do have LAG versus Seattle. I'm going to go Seattle 3-1. I think this could go either way as well. If LAG has a pop-off series and someone like Mac or Accuracy has a really down series, definitely one that LAG can win. Minnesota versus LAT. I think Minnesota ends it off on a nice win against the Thieves here. I do think they need a bit of a regain after what happened to them in the last major, in the last stage, and I think they can get that here versus the Thieves. And then Boston versus New York. Like I said, anything can happen. I think New York is probably overall the stronger team, but I'm going to go Boston 3-2. I think this could go either way, right? This is a series that I think either team could 3-0 the other one, depending on how they're playing that day. But I'm going to give Boston the edge in a game 5. To give you a quick little recap on how my kind of bracket and everything stands out. So basically in the winners, I'm going to have Seattle, LA Thieves, Minnesota, Vegas, New York, Atlanta, Toronto, and Texas. So I have Seattle and LA Thieves being 4-1, and the rest of the teams going 3-2. And then in the elimination rounds down here, we're going to have Boston at a 2-3 record, LAG and Florida at a 1-4 record, and London at an 0-5 record. So I think that kind of pretty much almost aligns perfectly with the way the current standings look, which makes sense when you're predicting games, because you can only go off of how teams have looked. I think basically Minnesota and Vegas are going to do a little bit better than expected, and I do think someone like Boston's going to do worse than expected, and maybe Atlanta and Toronto are going to do a little bit worse than expected. I think overall it's going to be interesting to see how these matches come out. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like, sub to the channel for some more CDL coverage, and I'll see you all in the next one.